I don't know where I guess I disappeared forever. There we go. All right. Which would be fine with me. Let's move along to a little bit of content we wanted to hit tonight. Read a mock draft from Chad Reuter over at NFL.com, and we put a little article together. I try to keep the articles from getting too wordy. I just want to give you guys the information and share it along here. But the latest mock has the Packers trading up in the first round. So this was Chad Reuter that did a mock draft for NFL.com. It's my understanding he's been pretty accurate in the past. But, people do so many mock drafts. It's, it is what it is. Peter Schrager, in my opinion, is the one you want to watch for. Dude crushes it every year. I mean, absolutely crushes. I'm not saying he's the best of the best. I'm sure you could find some draft Nick on a lowly website that, and I mean that with all due respect, that probably has a more accurate mock draft than Peter Schrager. But Peter Schrager is so plugged in with all 32 teams. He's built these relationships, these working friendships with people like Sean McVay and other head coaches and GMs that he's just got the inside information for sure. So now, as we scroll down, here is what happened with Chad Reuter's mock draft. As the 2025 NFL Draft approaches, anticipation is building for how teams will shape their futures. In the latest and most comprehensive projection, NFL.com's Chad Reuter delivers a gripping 7-round mock draft packed with bold predictions and strategic trades that could redefine franchise. It was released on April 18, 2025. Reuter's mock draft forecasts 5 first-round trades. 5. That kind of took me off guard a little bit because everybody's saying – most of these teams, if anything, they'll want to trade down. It's just going to be hard to find a partner and want to trade up because once you get outside of the top 10 picks, man, it's like between 10 and 40, the prospects are pretty much the same. And I love seeing that come into focus because Daniel Jeremiah talked about it right off the bat when he first started diving into the research for the draft this year. Former NFL scout Daniel Jeremiah, he said, man, I think he said from 20 to 60, take your pick. Everybody kind of looks the same. Right. Well, now as you get closer to the draft and more information comes out, it feels like it's 10 to 40 is that sweet spot. That's why we're always looking to trade back when we do mock drafts for that very reason, right? Is because you can get just as good or almost as good value trading back 5 picks because you're still in that sweet spot from that 10 to 40. As long as you stay underneath 40, you're in a good spot to still get an equal talent around that spot. Or who knows, maybe a better talent falls to you. You trade back, pick up some draft collateral, and still get someone who projected higher than where you originally thought you were going to be able to land someone. So those 5 first-round trades really kind of caught me off guard. Surprising top 10 selections and a flurry of offensive talent grabs, including quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers from the New York Jets, lending a new signal caller to the Dallas Cowboys, doubling down on offensive firepower. This mock draft sets the stage for a transformative weekend. So what I did was just focus on the Packers picks here, okay? And I just did the top 2. Now, I wanted to point this out, too. I don't know if you guys can see this or not, and I'll try to zoom in enough. This is really cool on NFL.com. My eyes are going across trying to zoom in enough here. I apologize. So it's just got a ton of information. This is kind of like it's called the mock draft tracker for the Packers. And it shows first round trade up likelihood 3 out of 5 stars. So they think there's a decent chance the Packers could trade up in this draft just based off of how the mock drafts have fallen and aligning with the Packers' needs. First round trade down likelihood is actually 2 out of 5 stars. So they feel like there's a better chance of the Packers trading up than down in the first round, okay? Albeit it's not 4 or 5 stars. So, take that as you will. Quarterback need, obviously, projected star being Jordan Love, only 1 star. So I love how they just did that quick breakdown. Do we think they're trading up? Do they think they're trading back? And do they need a quarterback, right? And if you'll notice, you've got the mock draft tracker right here, like it's showing Chad Reuter on April 18th had wide receiver Emeka Egbuka. Mike Band, I think it is. Yeah, Mike Band on April 14th had him taking Jahdae Barron. I'd be okay with both of those. Lance Zierlein on April 1st says Savone Revel Jr. Would be the pick for the Packers at 23. Matthew Golden got picked by the Packers, according to Eric Edholm, back in March 28th. Derek Harmon, defensive tackle, was chosen by Charles Davis on March 27th. Will Johnson, cornerback, was taken by Bucky Brooks on March 25th. And then, of course, Maxwell Harrison was taken by Daniel Jeremiah back on March 18th. So you want to key in on the latest information. In this case, Chad Reuter saying the Packers are going to take wide receiver Emeka Egbuka. And then the recent one before that, just 4 days prior, was Jahdae Barron, cornerback out of Texas. Okay, so I love that little setup there. And if you'll notice over here, if you go to the website, you can see round one, it shows Packers draft targets, projected 2025 first round big board. It shows the players that they think the Packers would be interested in the most. Okay. Those players are Will Johnson, Ted McMillan, Jahdae Barron, Derek Harmon, Kenneth Grant, Donovan Ezaraku, and Gray Zabel. The only one I would push back on right there is Donovan Ezaraku, because if I remember correctly, and I want to double check real quick, I'm going to keep the board off the screen, but I just want to make sure I'm not getting him mixed up with someone else. I want to say Donovan Ezaraku, yeah, he does not meet the athletic threshold for the Packers. So that's the only one out of that list that I go, that'd probably be a little bit of a reach in the first round. Even in the second round, maybe Goody goes away from that athletic threshold, though. That's definitely could be the case, right? So I thought that was a really cool little screen grab they had, and then they got some cool little charts, things like that, off-season activities. It's just a really, really cool setup. So with that being said, back to the article, all right? It says, with the Green Bay Packers holding prime draft positioning, Reuter's mock draft offers an intriguing glimpse into their strategy to bolster a roster already showing playoff promise. In this analysis, we'll zero in on the Packers' first and second round approach, dissecting the players Reuter projects to land at Lambeau Field. From addressing key defensive needs to potentially adding dynamic offensive weapons for Jordan Love, Green Bay selections could set the tone for another deep postseason run. Let's unpack how Reuter envisions the Packers navigating these critical early rounds to solidify their contender status. So what he did was he traded up to pick 19 to take Emeka Egbuka. And I know some people see that and go, whoa, I don't want to do that. I would rather not, too. And you guys know I like Egbuka. We were on Egbuka before it got real popular, right? And it's just simply because we looked at the measurables. We looked at the things that Goody likes. We looked at our PFF big board. He's listed at better value than pick 23. That checks the box, right? He meets pretty much all the thresholds other than the Senior Bowl, which he can't control that he wasn't at the Senior Bowl. So with that being said, it made a lot of sense. Now, trading up to 19, me no likey that, Jan, right? I would rather, if he is taken, okay, great. Let's just take the best player available when we're at 23 or potentially trade back like we talked about. But, however, if Goody has a high enough grade on Egbuka, this may make sense. If the Packers were to trade up to 19 with Tampa and take Emeka Egbuka, then we know Goody had a damn good grade on Egbuka. Probably a tier, maybe 2 tiers higher than they may have had on anyone else there around the 23 spot, or maybe a tier higher than we even have on him. And again, we've got him, sitting pretty nice on our board here. So it says, we haven't seen the Packers draft a receiver in round 1 since 2002. I want to talk about that for a second. Everybody always brings that up as if it's like this horrible thing, right? Here's what's crazy, man. When you look at the Packers, the receivers that the Packers have drafted in the first round, they've only drafted 3 in the first round. Javon Walker was 2002, right? I think we could all say that was a bust. I mean, they had him for a few years. He held out for a contract. I remember Brett Favre speaking out about that and that being a big nasty thing. He ends up playing somewhere else for just a couple more seasons. It seemed like then he was out of the league. So I think it's safe to say Javon Walker was a bust. But before that, guess who the other 2 receivers were that they took in the first round? It was Sterling Sharp, Hall of Famer, and James Lofton, Hall of Famer. I say that because the Packers don't see the wide receiver position that valuable enough to reach in the first round like you would for an edge defender, a quarterback, a tackle, a defensive tackle. It's funny because I have people push back all the time on the fact that I actually had somebody in the YouTube comments earlier this morning that said, you guys need to do better research. It's obvious that wide receiver is like a top tier importance. I'm kind of paraphrasing. I'm going, but you may believe that. We can agree to disagree, but you're also disagreeing with Bill Walsh. How many Super Bowls did he win? You're also disagreeing with Bill Belichick. How many Super Bowls did he win? You're also disagreeing with Bill Parcells. How many Super Bowls did he win? Right? You're also disagreeing with Michael Lombardi, a former NFL GM, spent his whole football life in the NFL, and now he's the GM at North Carolina. Still weird hearing college football teams have GMs, but that's the day we live in, right? All these people, Ted Thompson, same thing. How can you say that, Clayton? Because Ted Thompson never pulled the trigger on a wide receiver in the first round, did he? So it's obvious he's not willing to reach for that position because he knows it's not that important. I'm not saying it isn't important, but you want to build through 3-tech or defensive tackle in general, edge rusher, tackle, specifically left tackle if possible, and quarterback. Those are the 4 cornerstones of your team, along with a head coach that knows exactly how the hell he's going to use all of those assets that are given to him. So you can disagree with that whole talk that wide receiver isn't that important, but you're also disagreeing with the brightest football minds in the history of the game. I didn't make that up. I didn't wake up one day and go, you know what? I'm smarter than everybody else. I don't think wide receiver is important. I read that in about a half a dozen books and listening to podcasts and audio books of people who have written, like it's essentially the autobiography of Bill Walsh, right? In those books is where I uncovered maybe I'm putting too much value on the wide receiver position. So that's how I got to that point. Just giving you a little background there. So anyway, in a bold move, we talked about that. To secure game-changing talent, the Green Bay Packers traded up to the 19th overall pick, selecting Ohio State wide receiver Emeka Egbuka, the 21st ranked prospect on our PTA big board. Egbuka, known for his crisp route running, reliable hands, and explosive playmaking ability, represents a dynamic addition to Jordan Love's arsenal. This strategic trade-up underscores Green Bay's commitment to bolstering their offensive firepower, aiming to elevate their passing game and keep pace in the high-octane NFC North. So wanted to mention that. And then, of course, the little write-up on him says, we haven't seen the Packers draft a wide receiver in round 1 since 2002, but we did see them move up in round 2 for Christian Watson 3 years ago. With the top cornerbacks no longer available in this mock, Green Bay swaps a 3rd pick for a 5th. So they gave up a 3rd, got a 5th back, traded up from 23 to 19 to nab Emeka Egbuka. All right, so that's their justification of selecting a receiver there. So let's see. This is a great question. IROC says, but does a wide receiver or a nose tackle get us closer to a Lombardi? See, that's the thing you got to look at, right? Kenny Clark last year, we heard about it all year long. Kenny Clark is washed, right? Kenny Clark's done. It's, there's a lot of touch spying going on. That's why I gave a little bit of grace. But let me ask you this question. Let me ask you that question this way, all right? Think of the great team. Let's think of the Packers' last 2 Super Bowl teams, okay? Who was the top receiver for the Green Bay Packers when they won in 1996? Some would say it was Andre Rison, right? Well, they went and got him off the scrap heap, if you'll remember. Some would say it's a young Antonio Freeman. Okay, cool. I can't remember if Robert Brooks was healthy that year or not. I know he got hurt one year, and it's a long time ago. So Freeman, Solder says Freeman. Let's go with Freeman. Now, would you consider Freeman a Hall of Famer? Would you consider him an All-Pro, like a regular All-Pro top player, right? When you look at it and go, okay, in 1996, which one was more valuable to the Green Bay Packers? You guys remember they had the number 1 defense that year? They get swept under the rug all the time, right? They had the number 1 defense in the entire National Football League. Antonio Freeman, if that's the receiver we want to use, or Andre Rison that nobody else wanted in the league and we went and got, or Gilbert Brown. See what I'm saying? Also, someone else who played defensive end and also kicked inside to 3 and 4 at times, Reggie White. So which one was more valuable to the Green Bay Packers? Meaning, if you took that player off the team, if you took one of the players off the team and left the other, do they still win the Super Bowl? I don't think that defense is near as good against the run or the pass, to be honest with you, without Gilbert Brown. It damn sure isn't without Reggie White, who played very versatile on that defensive line, right? As opposed to Antonio Freeman. I feel like if Antonio Freeman, a young Antonio Freeman, wasn't available, they still have a legitimate shot to win that Super Bowl. Now, let's fast forward to 2010, the last Super Bowl the Packers won, right? Who was the top receiver that year? Because I'm pretty sure they had the best defense that year, too. They definitely had a top 3 defense that year because that's when it really popped for Dom Capers, right? Greg Jennings. Would you consider Greg Jennings this all-world player? How come when Greg Jennings left the Packers, he did nothing anywhere else, right? And by the way, Greg Jennings, second-round pick, right? Who anchored? I love it. This is just how my mind works. It's just so simple. I'm an idiot. You guys know by my accent, I'm an absolute moron. So I try to break things down as simplistic as possible. What's the blueprint for winning a Super Bowl? Who was the defensive tackle for the Green Bay Packers? It was B.J. Raji. Who had a pick six from the defensive tackle position in the NFC Championship? B.J. Raji. Who anchored that 34 jam front all year long? B.J. Raji. What else did they have at edge? Clay Matthews. Both of them first-round picks. That's how I get to the point where it's like, okay, if wide receiver is best available, yeah, I'm good with it, man. I have no problem. If Ted McMillan's there at 23, run the damn card. Run it, right? But this whole idea that you better reach to get a receiver, we got to have a receiver. Guys, we had a good passing game last year. We didn't get beat by the Eagles because we didn't have a rookie wide receiver that is deemed a number one receiver. How much of an impact is a rookie receiver going to make his first year in the league anyway, right? But boy, oh boy, if you can go get you somebody in the trenches, 3-tech, edge defender, someone that I prefer a 3-tech because I feel like we've got edge defenders. That's just me personally. We were 8th in the league in sacks last year, and it wasn't because the defensive tackles were so good. So, with that being said, and this is great, Solder says things that have changed since 2010. Wide receivers are more ready to play out of the box. The contract structure for wide receiver is higher. Rules favor throwing the ball. Correct. Now, let me ask you this. Who won the Super Bowl last year? It was the Philadelphia Eagles, right? What was the Philadelphia Eagles' strength in their game last year? It's a common theme. Which is more important? If you took A.J. Brown off the Eagles, right, do you think they still win the Super Bowl? I think there's a good shot. But if you take Jalen Carter out of the middle of that defensive line for the Eagles, there's a far less shot of them winning that Super Bowl, in my opinion. Also, the running game, right? They had a good offensive line. They focused on running the ball, controlling the clock, that type of thing. A.J. Brown's a great receiver, although there are rumors that he may be traded. I don't think that's true, but I just seen that come across earlier, right? The other thing, there you go, bingo. You hit it right here. MG Toe Legends nailed it. Rush with 4. When you can hit home with 4, you can have 7 in coverage. That's what causes a team like the Packers to struggle. And by the way, when you get down by a couple scores, do you think a number one receiver is going to be the difference in you getting back in that game? It's probably not, because what's going to happen? Teams are going to start to play a shell, and they're going to force you to go underneath anyway, right? And again, this is just how my football mind fires. So there you go, man. And I love this, Greg Rice. This cracks me up, man. I don't mean any disrespect. If they never score, you never lose. Hit the nail on the head. And as I'm reading, I'm thinking, you're probably thinking, well, if we never score, we never win, right? I thought that's the route you were going. But you're right, man. When you put pressure on the other team like that defensively, things change. Things change big time. And again, I'm not saying wide receiver is not important. I'm simply saying this whole idea that we've got to reach for a receiver, I just can't subscribe to. But we're going to continue this conversation on the other side. I plan on doing 1 hour. But boy, oh boy, this is fun. And you guys are lively in the chat. I'm trying to glance and keep you guys involved. I apologize if I'm not doing enough. But we'll continue this conversation on the other side for hour 2. For everybody listening on the pod, we appreciate you. We'll see you over there in just a second. For those of you listening on the pod, I did it myself. All right, there you go. Let me make a quick little note here. I apologize. Let me get into this. All right, just to know where I left off. Okay, so again, I didn't plan on going that far with receiver. The receiver talk. And I want people to understand, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just simply saying it should not be the top priority, me personally. But let's move it along here. The second pick that the Packers made in this mock was JT TuaMalo. I think I'm saying that name right. Obviously, Ohio State edge defender. When I seen that at first, guys, I thought, I feel like he's a little lower on our board. I haven't mocked him to the Packers much at all at 54, right? And this kind of blindsided me a little bit. And then when I got to digging and put this in the article here, with the 54th pick, Chad Reuter has the Green Bay Packers bolster their defensive front by selecting Ohio State edge defender JT TuaMalo, a standout ranked as the 44th best prospect on our PTA big board. TuaMalo's blend of power, agility, and relentless motor makes him a high-value addition at this stage, offering the Packers a versatile pass rusher to complement their defensive scheme. This selection signals Green Bay's intent to fortify their trenches, providing a steal at pick 54 to disrupt opposing offenses in the NFC. I know, I completely understand that we have a whole lot of Ohio State haters that watch the show, because anytime I talk Ohio State, I get roasted sometimes in the comments. And I can appreciate the passion for people not liking specific teams. I grew up hating specific college football teams as well. But with that being said, I want the best football players for the Green Bay Packers. I could give a rat's ass who they played for. I don't care if they played for Podunk University, Valdosta State, doesn't matter to me. I want the best football players. You know, the team that I probably hate the most right now, being a Notre Dame fan, it's probably USC. And Caleb Williams really helped kind of stabilize that hatred for USC. As a Kentucky fan, you really like to root against Florida, the Florida Gators, because for so long they just kicked us all over the field. But man, Elijah Badger late in the draft, give me that dude. Give me him, right? I can't think of anybody right off the bat for USC. That's pretty cool. I dogged them without even planning it. I can't think of anybody for USC that I would want right off the bat here. But that's kind of how I see it. So I understand the hatred for Ohio State, but this TuaMalo, the fact that he was 44th on our board, I went, why has that never lined up for us? Maybe it's because in most mock drafts, he's going a little earlier than that. I don't know. Or going too early that he's not there at 54. But I thought that was interesting. What do you guys think about TuaMalo at 54? I want to get the chat's take on this, and I'll try to weave it in here, at least read it myself here after the stream. I wanted to get your all's take on that, because that's one that hasn't really popped up to me much, for sure. Let's see. Rod in the chat says, I have a feeling that Badger will go much earlier than we think. I'd say you're probably right, Rod. We can't be the only knuckleheads that stumbled onto him with the success against man coverage and the drop rate, right? Like, there's going to be other people that like him probably a lot higher than we do. And again, he's lower on our board because you guys know how our board lines up. There's multiple reasons why he's down there that low. But when you look at the man coverage in the hands, there's a lot to like there. Do You Rant says JTT is legit at 54. I'm glad I'm not the only one seeing it. Again, it kind of caught me off guard, man. John Smith says not the worst pick. All right, cool. All right, let's see here. The Monster Aggressor says, I want Nolan or Grant first round and then edge. Let's just create monsters up front. I mean, that's the blueprint. That's the blueprint that the Eagles have set in motion, right? So I would be totally on board with taking a 3-tech in the first round. But again, I'll be okay with Ibuka at 23. People are going, Clayton, you just spent the whole show saying wide receiver isn't as important as some people make it out to be. True. But when the value's there, when the board lines up, yeah, you could take it. So it's totally cool. But if Kenneth Grant's there and he's significantly higher on the board than Ibuka, Ted McMillan's the only wide receiver that I would like over any defensive tackle in this draft, me personally. Really any other position in this draft, outside of like we talk about, like an Armand Mimbu falling, boy, I would run the card on that one, me personally. There's several different players that, probably 3 or 4 that I go, yeah, I would take them over Ted. Ted's one that I really like Ted, man. I do. And again, you guys know we done a deep dive on the whole, him not liking to watch film. I love how people still keep bringing it up, but they're failing to mention. They always conveniently leave out he said that after his freshman year, 2 years ago when the kid was whatever he was, 19 years old. And he didn't say he doesn't watch film. He said he doesn't enjoy watching film. Okay. Yeah, take him off the board. That blew my mind. So, again, man, I think somebody like Tet or Ibuka I would be totally on board with for sure. Let's see here if anybody else on TuaMalo. Here we go. Let's see here. Here's a little bit of TuaMalo talk. Deadfish says TuaMalo was high on Baz's edge analysis. Good stuff, man. Good stuff there. H.E. Soder says TuaMalo feels a lot like LVM. Let me look at our board real quick, because you may be onto something there, Soder. Let me just check real quick. We got him in the 44 spot. Let me go ahead and drop this down. Actually, we're done with this. Let's get that out of here. Hopefully, y'all enjoyed that little write-up. I think it's cool to see other people's mock drafts like that and just kind of see where they've got certain guys. So JT TuaMalo, when we look at why he is in the spot that he's in on our big board, okay, 2022, he was 183rd at his position. 2023, he was 191st at his position, took a step back. And then in 24, he jumps all the way to 31st at his position. So really, really good PFF grade in 2024. PFF big board at the end of the college football season had him in the 43 spot. Consensus big board had him at 53. Daniel Jeremiah had him at 49. Kyle Krabs had him at 60. Dane Brugler had him at 41. He's a 9+ RAS. I think I can see where you're coming from there, but the only way I would push back there, Solder, it doesn't really feel like LVN to me because of that PFF grade, and the fact that, like I said, Daniel Jeremiah having him in that spot. And again, we're talking about 54, right? We're not talking about 23, but I'd have to do a little more digging, Solder. I'd like to see what his pressure rate and all that stuff is, because obviously that's not baked into the board. We just got the grades and the rankings and everything, but you may be onto something there. If anybody knows his pressure rate and his sack totals, let us know in the chat. I'd like to know. But again, with TuaMalo, he meets the threshold. He was not a Senior Bowl guy. He was a team captain, right? The Packers have not met with him, but that could be one of those guys that, hey, they didn't even need to meet with him. We like what we see there. Let's don't tip our hand. Could have been the case as well. So, all right. So there you go. A little TuaMalo talk from that mock draft. Now let's move on to the next thing here. We're going to do a different kind of mock